This is not a scheduled broadcast. If you're hearing this, stay where you are. Keep your radios on, do not panic. We've just received reports of a widespread medical emergency, but details remain unclear. There is no official statement from health authorities, no warnings from the government. We only have the voices of those living through it. Frantic calls, desperate messages, terrified whispers. People are collapsing. Not everyone, just some. No symptoms, no warning. One moment they're standing, the next they're gone. Some say it's a virus, others say it's something else, but no one knows why certain people are affected while others remain untouched. If you're still listening, take note. This is not a test. This is happening now in real time. We will stay on air as long as possible, bringing you live updates as they come in. If you have information, if you've seen something, if someone near you has fallen, call in. Stay with us. Stay alert. We don't know what's happening. We don't know who's next. We're receiving reports from across the city, doctors, first responders, even civilians with no medical background describing the same terrifying phenomenon. It doesn't spread like a normal virus. It's not airborne, not in the water. People are dying, but only certain people. There's no pattern. It's not age, gender, health, or location. Families are watching loved ones drop beside them while they remain untouched. Hospitals are overwhelmed, but even the doctors have no answers. They're seeing patients die in front of them with no common symptoms. No fever, no seizures, just silence. We reached out to officials, but they refuse to comment. Some claim this is an isolated event, but the calls flooding in tell a different story. The fear is growing. The uncertainty is worse. If you're listening, if you're safe, stay inside. If you notice something, anything, call us. We need to understand what's happening before it's too late. A woman in Brighton says her husband collapsed while pouring coffee. A father in Chicago says his teenage son slumped over in the middle of a sentence. A firefighter in Boston reports walking into a home where an entire family lay still, untouched food still on the table. There are no signs of struggle, no distress, no cries for help. 1 second, they're alive. The next, they're gone. Emergency responders are at a loss. The hospitals can't keep up. Morgues are filling faster than they can process bodies. Some cities are going dark. No outgoing calls, no messages. Entire communities are falling silent. But why? Why some and not others? What connects the victims? What are we missing? Keep listening. We'll find the truth. A caller, voice shaking, barely above a whisper. I don't understand. My brother was right next to me. We were watching TV. I heard him breathe in. Then, nothing. I shook him. I screamed. He wouldn't wake up. She sobs into the receiver. The sound is raw, broken. We eat the same food. We live in the same house. We're the same blood. A pause. A trembling exhale. So why him? Why not me? The line goes dead. There's no answer. No way to comfort them, because no one knows. A leaked recording. A voice, hoarse and hurried. We've run every test. Blood samples, DNA analysis, environmental factors. We thought it was genetics, but it's not. We thought it was blood type, but it's not. The voice shakes. A deep breath, then barely above a whisper. It's something else. Something we missed. The transmission cuts out. No further data, no follow-up, just silence. And the terrifying realization that whatever this is, it's already too late. The official response came quickly, but it was anything but reassuring. A press release from the Department of Public Health labeled the situation as anomalous but contained. Authorities dismissed the deaths as isolated medical incidents, urging the public to remain calm. There is no cause for alarm, one government official stated in a broadcast earlier today. There is no evidence to suggest an outbreak, contagion, or any form of public health crisis. But as the statement played on repeat across national news channels, the calls coming into this station told a very different story. Reports were flooding in from cities, towns, and rural areas alike. different locations, different backgrounds, but the same chilling scenario. People were collapsing seemingly at random. No fever, no signs of illness, no struggle, just gone. Hospitals were filling up, but doctors had no answers, no common symptoms, no known cause. Families reported losing loved ones in an instant, while others sat beside them, untouched. And the inconsistencies in the reports, they weren't random, they were systematic. Officials claimed the cases were few and far between. But too many people were seeing it firsthand. Too many to ignore. Stay with us. Keep listening. Because the official story, it isn't adding up. It should have made sense by now. Viruses follow rules. They spread through contact, through air, through water. They have incubation periods, identifiable symptoms, patterns. But this doesn't behave like any virus we've seen before. Medical professionals are baffled. Some of the first doctors to study the victims say there is no indication of infection, no inflammation, no internal failure, no detectable foreign agent in the blood. It's as if the body simply stops. The heart halts mid-beat. The brain goes quiet. And yet, those closest to the victims remain unaffected. Early theories suggested a genetic link, but those were quickly disproven. Families with identical DNA sequences have suffered different fates. One sibling taken, the other left standing in shock. Blood type doesn't explain it. Age, weight, pre-existing conditions, none of it connects the victims. The deaths are not random, but the reason behind them remains terrifyingly unknown. The experts are trying. They're running tests, analyzing patterns, looking for anything that might explain who is at risk and who isn't. But the answers just aren't there. And without answers, fear is spreading faster than any disease ever could. We are still gathering information. If you know something, if you've seen something, call in. We need to piece this together before it's too late. A woman in Ohio lost her husband and 2 children within seconds of each other. A teenager in New York sat in a room full of friends, watching in horror as every single one of them slumped over, unmoving. A man in Texas woke up to silence, his entire family gone, while he remained. There's a pattern, not in the victims, but in how they fall. Some homes remain untouched, while others lose everyone inside. Some neighborhoods are silent, lifeless, while others continue as if nothing ever happened. Emergency responders tell us they're finding entire households wiped out in an instant. A first responder, still in shock, described arriving at a suburban home. Lights still on, television still playing, a meal half-eaten on the table. A family of 5, all seated where they should have been. None of them breathing. And yet, their next-door neighbors are fine, unaware. Clueless until they notice the house next door has gone dark. If it isn't a virus, then what is it? If it isn't contagious, then why do families fall together? What is linking these deaths? And perhaps the most terrifying question of all, who is next? The recording was never meant to be heard. It wasn't broadcast on any official channel. It wasn't released in any public statement. It was leaked, sent anonymously to multiple news stations, appearing in encrypted messages on obscure online forums, a scientist's voice shaking, urgent. We assumed it was a virus. That's what made sense. That's what fit the model. But the data doesn't support it. There's no sign of infection, no transmission pathway, no biological agent. A pause, then a sharp inhale. We're not looking at a disease. We're looking at something else. Something bigger. The voice grows quieter, as if afraid of being overheard. We analyzed victims across demographics. Different races, different health conditions, different genetic markers. No commonality. A long silence, then the words that sent a chill through everyone who heard them. What if this isn't an illness? What if it's a selection? The recording cuts off. No name. No timestamp. No way to verify its authenticity. but the implications are undeniable. If this isn't a disease, then what is it? And who or what is making the selection? The clip has since been scrubbed from most platforms. Authorities refuse to comment. But people are talking, speculating, panicking. And if the scientist was right, if this isn't random, then how long before the next selection is made? The official explanations are unraveling. The government insists the event is under control, but their words are drowned out by the chaos unfolding in the streets. People want answers, and they want them now. Hospitals are at capacity, filled with bodies no one can explain. News reports contradict themselves. One expert says it's environmental, another says psychological. Social media is flooded with theories, radiation leaks, biological warfare, divine punishment. The phrase targeted culling begins trending, though no one knows what it really means. Protests erupt outside government buildings. Some demand transparency, others plead for protection. A group in Philadelphia takes matters into their own hands, breaking into a medical research lab searching for classified files. They find nothing, at least nothing the public is allowed to see. Meanwhile, small towns go dark. Entire neighborhoods fall silent overnight. No emergency broadcasts, no evacuation orders, just an absence. Streets lined with empty cars, houses untouched but lifeless inside. Those left behind grow more desperate, more paranoid. If the government doesn't have answers, then who does? People are calling this a cover-up, a test, a purge. Theories spiral, but the fear is real. The world is waiting for the truth. And the longer the silence stretches, the more it feels like the truth is something we were never meant to know. She speaks softly, her voice brittle. We were sitting on the couch, watching TV. Everything was normal. A breath, unsteady. I turned to ask him something, and he just wasn't there anymore. She doesn't mean he left. She doesn't mean he moved. She means that in the time it took for her to turn her head, her husband had gone still. No struggle, no sign of pain, just eyes staring at the screen, fingers curled slightly on his lap. She thought he was joking, playing some kind of cruel trick. Then she saw his chest wasn't rising. He was there, and then he wasn't. Her voice cracks. I don't understand. She says the paramedics arrived in minutes. They checked for a pulse, shined a light in his eyes. One of them whispered something under his breath before they carried the body away. They didn't ask her if she was feeling unwell. They didn't test her, didn't even check her vitals. They just left her, sitting there, untouched, unaffected, and that's what terrifies her the most. By now, patterns should have emerged. There should be some kind of logic, an age group, a medical condition, a shared exposure. But doctors and scientists are coming up empty. The victims have nothing in common. A 22-year-old college athlete collapses mid-run. A 60-year-old diabetic woman dies in her sleep. A newborn, less than a week old, is found lifeless in its crib, yet in each case, people around them, those who shared the same space, the same meals, the same air, remain completely unaffected. A research team analyzing the cases compares blood types, DNA markers, underlying health conditions. None of it adds up. One scientist describes it as trying to solve an equation where half the numbers are missing. There is no progression of symptoms, no incubation period. 1 second, a person is alive. The next, they're not. And then there's the most disturbing discovery. Even when exposed to the deceased, the living show no signs of illness. Hospitals stop isolating bodies. Autopsies yield no evidence of organ failure, no internal bleeding, no infections. There is no physical cause of death. This isn't how viruses work. Something is wrong. Something is missing. And the fact that no one can explain it, that's what terrifies people the most. Stay with us. Because if this isn't a virus, what is it? The official response is as baffling as the outbreak itself. Cities are shutting down, but not in ways that make sense. Some entire regions are under lockdown, while others, where reports are just as frequent, remain completely open. In New York, authorities barricade certain districts, yet leave others untouched. Flights are grounded in some countries, yet unrestricted in others. Entire apartment complexes are forcibly evacuated, but the buildings next to them left alone. There is no explanation. People are starting to notice. Some believe officials know more than they're saying, that they've identified a pattern and are selectively protecting certain areas. Others argue the opposite, that the government is just as lost as the public, throwing random solutions at a crisis they don't understand. Then there are those who see something even darker, that the lockdowns themselves are part of a larger strategy, not containment, but control. A way to track movements, a way to see who survives and who doesn't. Protests begin. Citizens push back. Some defy quarantine orders, desperate for answers. Rumors spread that government officials are secretly relocating certain individuals. But why? Are they protecting them? Or removing them from the equation? The uncertainty is turning to paranoia. And paranoia, that's when people start making dangerous choices. Fear is a breeding ground for speculation. With no official explanation, people are desperate to make sense of the chaos. Theories begin forming, spreading like wildfire across the internet, whispered through private chat rooms and late-night radio broadcasts. Some cling to the idea that it's genetic, a flaw in the DNA, a hidden marker selecting certain people for death. But geneticists refute it. Families with identical sequences are seeing different fates. Others suggest blood type, diet, or even past medical history. But nothing fits. Then the theories turn darker. What if this isn't biological at all? What if it's psychological? People who believe they are safe, stay safe. Those who fear they'll be taken, they die. A self-fulfilling prophecy. The idea spreads, taking hold of those desperate for control. Convince yourself you're immune, they say, or you won't be. But the most chilling theory yet, the one growing in the shadows of anonymous forums, is the idea that this isn't random at all, that it's a selection, not a disease, not an accident, but a test, a process. And if that's true, then the real question isn't how to survive. It's who is choosing and why. It happened during the evening news. Millions were watching. A trusted anchor, the kind of face people relied on in moments of uncertainty, sat behind his desk, reading updates on the crisis. His voice was calm, steady, reassuring. Then, mid-sentence, he stopped. His co-host turned to him, expecting a correction, a hesitation, maybe a technical issue, but he just sat there, staring forward, silent, still. She said his name, once, twice. Then, with rising panic, she reached for him. His body slumped sideways, lifeless before he even hit the desk. The network cut the feed immediately. For a moment, screens across the country went dark. Then, an emergency message appeared. We are experiencing technical difficulties. But the damage was already done. Within minutes, clips flooded social media. People analyzed the footage frame by frame, searching for clues. Was he sick? Did he show any symptoms before? Could this be proof of airborne transmission? Or was it something else? But the most unsettling thing wasn't his death. It was his co-host. Because as she sat frozen in horror as her colleague collapsed inches away from her, she didn't move. She didn't reach for her own throat, didn't clutch her chest. She didn't so much as cough. Because whatever this was, it didn't come for her. And now people are asking, why him? Why not her? And more importantly, who's next? It started as a rumor. A whispered theory passed between panicked citizens, dismissed as fear-mongering. But now there's proof. A leaked document, origin unknown, contains names. Hundreds of them. People from different cities, different professions, different ages. Some of them are already dead, others are still alive. But for how long? The implications are horrifying. If the deaths were random, why do these names exist? If there's no pattern, why are some people on a list before they even show symptoms? And the biggest question of all, who is compiling them? Authorities refuse to acknowledge the document's existence. Some claim it's a hoax designed to spread fear. Others believe it's real, that someone, some organization, some unseen force, knows exactly who will be taken next. One man claims his wife's name was on it. She was fine when he found the list. 3 hours later, she was gone. A journalist determined to expose the truth searched for her own name. It wasn't there. The relief was fleeting. 2 days later, an updated version surfaced. This time, her name was on it. She hasn't been heard from since. Now people are scouring the lists, searching for themselves, for loved ones. Some are praying their names don't appear. Others believe that if they're not listed, maybe that means they were never meant to survive in the first place. Fear has turned to fury. With no answers and no clear way to stop the deaths, the world is unraveling. Protests have turned violent. Government buildings are being set on fire. Scientists are being dragged from their labs, accused of hiding the truth. But the paranoia doesn't stop there. Neighbors are turning on each other. Families are fracturing. Some believe that people marked for death should be isolated, locked away before they can spread whatever this is, if it even spreads at all. Others are convinced that certain individuals are being spared on purpose, protected by forces the rest of the world doesn't understand. Survivors who have lost entire families are being hunted, accused of being the cause, of being different in some invisible way. People who haven't fallen sick are being questioned, forced to explain why they are still alive when so many around them have died. Conspiracy groups are forming, broadcasting theories over hijacked frequencies, claiming the deaths are selective, deliberate, that this is an experiment, a purge, a warning. And through it all, one thing is becoming clear. This isn't just about survival anymore. This is about control. Because if someone, somewhere, already knows who's next, then maybe this was never about a virus at all. Maybe this was always about something much worse. It began with whispers, uneasy glances between neighbors, friends hesitating before shaking hands, a moment of hesitation before stepping into a crowded space. Then the whispers turned to accusations. People started keeping their distance, not because they were sick, but because they feared they might be next, or worse, that they might be unknowingly spreading it. The problem is no one knows what it is. There are no symptoms, no visible warning signs. One moment someone is fine. The next, they're gone. Now trust is crumbling. Stores have become battlegrounds as people fight over supplies. Some refuse to leave their homes at all, convinced that simply being near others increases the risk. Others lash out in blind fear, accusing strangers of being silent carriers. There's no proof that anyone can pass it on, but that doesn't matter. Fear doesn't need proof. It just needs doubt. People are marking their doors with symbols, signals to show they are untouched, uninfected, signs of reassurance that mean nothing. Families are forming pacts, promising not to interact with outsiders. Friendships are dissolving overnight. And in the absence of answers, one terrifying question lingers. If we don't know how this spreads, then how do we know it hasn't already reached us? The news reports focus on the victims, the people who collapse lifeless without cause. But they don't talk about the ones left behind, the ones who wake up next to an empty space in their bed, the ones who set the dinner table only to realize they've set too many plates, the ones who don't even allow themselves to grieve, because grief means contact, and contact means risk. People aren't just losing loved ones, they're losing the ability to be with them. There are no funerals, no final goodbyes. Some survivors refuse to enter the rooms where their family members died, convinced that whatever took them might still be lingering in the air, in the walls, waiting for the next moment to strike. Others take it even further. They leave their homes entirely, choosing self-imposed exile over the unbearable weight of uncertainty. They won't hug their children. They won't kiss their spouses. Some even wear masks indoors, despite no proof that protection matters. And then there are the ones who make the hardest choice of all, the ones who watch their loved ones with quiet suspicion, wondering if they will be next, who quietly distance themselves, creating invisible barriers in the places they once felt safest. Not because they don't love them, but because love no longer feels safe. The mind hates an empty space. It will fill in the blanks with whatever it can. In the absence of answers, theories have taken their place. Some are harmless, people grasping for understanding, searching for patterns in the chaos. Others are dangerous. One belief spreading like wildfire is that the government knew about this long before it started. That this isn't an outbreak, it's a program. That the lists of victims aren't random at all. That someone somewhere is pulling the strings. Others believe this isn't human-made, but divine, a punishment, a reckoning, a thinning of the herd. Apocalyptic cults are emerging, claiming they were chosen to witness the fall of civilization. Some believe prayers will save them. Others believe sacrifice will. And then there are the ones who have stopped believing in anything at all. If no one is safe, if death doesn't follow logic, then maybe life itself isn't logical. Maybe the world has never been in our control to begin with. Maybe we've just been pretending we understood how things worked. And now the illusion is shattering. The question is, when everything you thought you knew starts to crumble, what do you replace it with? Truth? Faith? Or something much, much darker? The silence is the hardest part. A man sits alone at his dining table, staring at the untouched plates in front of him. His wife, his 2 children, all gone. It happened in an instant. No cries for help, no signs of struggle. One moment they were laughing, the next their heads drooped forward, their bodies motionless, and he was left sitting there, untouched. He isn't alone. Survivors across the world are asking the same question. Why me? Why did the virus, or whatever this is, pass over them? Why did it take their families, their friends, their neighbors, but leave them standing? Was it chance, luck, or something else entirely? Some have begun to believe they were meant to die, that their survival is a mistake. Others wonder if they carry something unseen, something waiting to activate. Many no longer see themselves as lucky, but as cursed, left behind in a world that is unraveling, where every breath feels borrowed, every moment stolen. And then there are those who fear a different answer, that they weren't simply spared, that they were chosen, but for what? The weight of that question is breaking people faster than the virus itself. A medical expert finally agrees to a live interview. One of the last still willing to talk. His voice is tired. The kind of tired that no amount of sleep could fix. He's seen too much. He starts carefully, repeating the same lines the public has heard before. No known cause, no confirmed transmission, no predictable pattern. But there's something in his tone, something uneasy. Then, the hesitation. A long pause. A deep breath. "We've been looking at this all wrong," he says. The host presses him. What does that mean? The doctor deflects, suddenly cautious, suddenly afraid. But the host doesn't let up. Finally, the doctor whispers, "I think I see a pattern, but I don't think we were supposed to." The line crackles. The host demands an explanation. The audience leans in, waiting for an answer, waiting for something. But the doctor is gone. The call disconnects. Attempts to reach him fail. His colleagues say he left the hospital hours ago. His house is empty, and no one has seen him since. At first, they told people to stay calm. Officials stood in front of cameras, assuring the public that everything was under control, that the situation was being handled, that there was no reason to panic. Then, one by one, they disappeared. Key figures went silent. Press conferences were abruptly canceled. The president hadn't been seen in days. A rumor surfaced that certain government officials were being evacuated, but no one believed it until entire convoys of unmarked vehicles were spotted heading toward classified locations. Then came the reports of underground bunkers sealed off from the public, housing only the powerful and the privileged. People demanded answers. Were they hiding from the virus? Did they know something the public didn't? But no response ever came. Emergency services collapsed soon after. Police departments, hospitals, and fire stations became ghost towns. Without leadership, first responders stopped showing up. Some left out of fear. Others simply realized no one was coming to replace them. The streets became lawless. People realized there was no help coming, no protection, no authority left to stop what was coming next. And that's when the real panic began. It started as a rumor, an anonymous post on a conspiracy forum, a government report never meant for the public detailing something terrifying. Most dismissed it as fake until major news outlets picked up the story. The document was real, and it changed everything. It was dated 3 months before the first known case. It outlined a theoretical mass fatality event caused by a selective mortality phenomenon. It didn't refer to it as a virus. It didn't refer to it as a disease. It referred to it as a process. Worse still, it contained projections, numbers that eerily matched the real-time death tolls, specific cities and regions flagged for monitoring, names of individuals and families marked as pre-selected casualties. If this was true, it meant the government wasn't just aware of the outbreak beforehand. They had anticipated it, planned for it. But why? What was this process they referenced? Was it a controlled purge? A test? A mistake? Before these questions could be answered, the document vanished. Websites hosting it were taken down. Journalists who covered the story reported strange power outages, lost files, phone lines going dead. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The world had seen the truth. And now it was out for blood. The first riot started outside a government building, people demanding answers, demanding someone take responsibility. Within hours, it had spread. Crowds flooded the streets, chanting, screaming, smashing windows. But it wasn't just government offices being targeted. Hospitals, news stations, research labs, any place suspected of hiding the truth became a battleground. Then came the paranoia. The idea that certain people were immune, that certain people were chosen to survive. Neighborhoods turned against each other. People who hadn't lost anyone were accused of being part of it, of knowing something the rest didn't. In some places, survivors were forced out of their homes, beaten or worse. False accusations spread faster than facts. Some claimed scientists were responsible, that they had engineered this disaster. Others blamed politicians, billionaires, secret societies. Anyone who had disappeared was presumed guilty, and anyone who remained was a potential target. Looting turned to murder. Entire cities burned. No one was safe. Not the innocent, not the guilty, not the few officials left trying to keep order. And in the midst of it all, one truth became clear. It no longer mattered what had started this. What mattered was that humanity had already lost. The reports came in quietly at first, barely noticed among the chaos, a handful of survivors claiming the impossible, people who had been marked for death, their names appearing on leaked lists, their families bracing for the inevitable, had suddenly, inexplicably recovered. But there was a catch. Every single one of them had lost someone close to them just before they got better. A husband who had watched his wife's slow decline, only to wake up feeling fine after she passed. A child who had been bedridden for days, suddenly walking again after their father collapsed in the same room. Doctors had no explanation, no medical reason for the turnarounds. The victims should have died. They should have followed the same pattern as everyone else. But instead, they lived, at the cost of another. This wasn't a cure. It wasn't a treatment. It was a trade. And that raised a horrifying question. If this process, this selection, could be reversed, who or what was keeping the balance? Now, families with sick loved ones are faced with an impossible decision. Hope is dangerous. Hope means someone else must die. And no one knows if the choice is really theirs to make. It was a pirate broadcast, hijacking emergency frequencies for exactly 2 minutes and 13 seconds. The voice on the other end was weak, trembling, but his words were clear. You have to listen. This isn't a virus. It never was. A ragged breath. We got it wrong. It's not random. It's not a mutation. It's not an experiment. Silence stretched before he spoke again. It's a test, and we already failed. The transmission flickered, cutting in and out as if it were being jammed. The researcher was speaking from somewhere hidden, but his voice suggested he didn't have long. We thought we were looking at symptoms, but they're not symptoms. They're requirements, conditions being met. This, whatever this is, it's making selections, balancing the scales. A cough, a groan, then a final gasping whisper. They're keeping count. The line went dead. No one knows where he was broadcasting from. His voice was analyzed, but no match was found. It was as if he had never existed. Authorities tried to dismiss it as a hoax, but deep down, people already knew, because the numbers always balanced. The station had been running nonstop since the first reports. News, updates, survivor calls. It had been a lifeline for those still searching for answers. Then one evening at exactly 11:57 p.m., it all stopped. No warning, no sign-off, just silence. For days, people tuned in, waiting for a voice, a sign that someone was still out there. Nothing came. Emergency alerts were still broadcasting. Automated messages looping endlessly. But the station itself was dead. Rumors spread. Some claimed the broadcasters had been taken, silenced before they could reveal more. Others said they had vanished, their names added to the list they had spent so long exposing. And then, after 72 hours of silence, a single transmission broke through. Just a few words, no voice, no explanation, a simple message repeated twice before the static returned. It was never about who dies, it was about who stays. No one knows what it means. No one knows if it was a warning or a verdict. And no one knows if somewhere someone is still listening. It started with an anonymous post, a scientist claiming to have found the pattern. Not a theory, not speculation, proof. No one believed it at first. Dozens of so-called experts had already come forward with explanations. Genetics, blood type, neurological conditions, all had been debunked, but this one was different. The scientists didn't ask for attention, didn't beg to be heard. They simply posted a single sentence. You're looking at the wrong people. It's not about who dies. It's about who stays. Then files started leaking. Research notes, medical charts, government logs, thousands of documents flooding the dark corners of the internet. Diagrams, highlighted phrases, cryptic annotations, pieces of a puzzle too large for one person to put together. But before anyone could make sense of it, the scientists vanished. Their accounts were wiped, their research scrubbed. Journalists who had reached out to them reported strange interruptions, calls dropping, messages disappearing. One investigator went to their listed address and found an empty apartment, abandoned in a hurry. But their final message remained, a desperate warning buried in the chaos of deleted files. If you're reading this, it means they haven't stopped me yet. It's not a virus, it's a process. And the selection isn't random. It's already been decided. Then, silence. A survivor tells their story, one they were never supposed to share. A week before the first outbreak, they met a man. Not a scientist, not a government insider, just someone who knew. They were sitting in a diner, sipping coffee, when the stranger leaned in and whispered, You don't get sick unless you. Then static, not real static, memory static. A gap, a blank space where the words should be. The survivor remembers the feeling, an unease that settled deep in their bones, an instinct to forget. But something inside them refused. They remember the man's face, his shaking hands, the way he looked over his shoulder as if someone was listening. And they remember the urgency in his voice. Don't look at the deaths, look at the survivors. Who was spared and why? What did they do or fail to do to remain? And why did every recording of that moment, security cameras, phone audio, even the restaurant's live feed, cut out at the exact same second? Now the survivor is left with a question that haunts them. What was that man about to say? And what force was powerful enough to erase it? There aren't many left. The world's leading scientists, the ones who might have uncovered the truth, are missing. Some have fled into hiding. Others stopped responding entirely. Those who remain work in secret, their research scattered across underground networks, encrypted files, whispered messages pass through untraceable channels. They aren't looking for a cure anymore. They aren't searching for patient zero. They are trying to reverse engineer a decision that was never ours to make. One virologist, working from a makeshift lab in an abandoned subway station, sends out a final report. We've been studying the wrong thing. This isn't a pathogen. It's a signal, a trigger. The victims didn't die from exposure. They were activated. No one knows what that means. But before they can explain further, their broadcast cuts out. And now, those few remaining researchers, hidden, desperate, racing against time, are asking the same question as the rest of us. Are they uncovering the truth, or are they just waiting for their turn? The world is scrambling for answers. Scientists, survivors, theorists, everyone is searching for the missing piece. But the more people uncover, the less sense it makes. Some still cling to the idea that this is a virus, an undetectable pathogen that rewrites biology in ways modern medicine can't explain. But if that's true, why do autopsies show no signs of infection? No damaged organs, no cellular breakdown, nothing. As if the victims simply stopped. Others believe this isn't a disease at all, but an evolutionary event. A genetic failsafe buried deep in human DNA, activating after centuries of dormancy. A silent process waiting for the right moment to reshape the species. The only question is, who is being removed? The weak, the strong, or something else entirely? Then there's the most unsettling theory yet, that this has nothing to do with nature, that this is a mechanism, something built, a system older than civilization itself, resetting, recalibrating, eliminating. An ancient warning resurfaces from forgotten texts translated from a long-dead language. The world does not break, it is reset. And if that's true, then this was never about survival. Because how do you fight something that was designed to happen? And worse, who or what designed it? The station was about to sign off for the night when the signal cut in. Not from their feed, not from any known frequency. The voice was distorted, neither male nor female, ageless, calm. You were never meant to know. A pause. Then, again, softer this time. This was never for you. The broadcaster tried to speak, tried to demand answers, ask who was speaking, what they meant, but the voice continued, unshaken. You mistake this for chaos. It is not. It is order. A deep hum overtook the signal, like something massive, shifting, something incomprehensible, pressing against the edges of reality. The voice returned, quieter now, almost gentle. The numbers must balance. Then, silence. No origin. No trace. Every attempt to recover the signal failed. Engineers, radio operators, military specialists all said the same thing. That transmission didn't come from anywhere. It just was. And now the world is left with one final question. If we were never meant to know, Then what happens now that we do? The journal was found in an abandoned house, tucked beneath the floorboards. No name, no date. Just a final, desperate record from someone who had pieced together what no one else had. It was never about the sick. It was about the ones who stayed. Page after page, the writer detailed their observations. Cases across cities, across countries, across families. Victims had no shared DNA markers, no common medical history. But those left behind, they did. Buried in the notes was the pattern that had been overlooked. The survivors were connected, a web of relationships stretching back generations, old debts, unpaid balances, a chain reaction of choices made long before the first case. It's not illness, it's a correction. The final entry was brief, just 3 words, scrawled in shaky handwriting. They found me, and that was it. No body, no sign of struggle, just an open door, as if the writer had stepped outside, and vanished. The journal made its way to the few researchers still looking for answers. But the moment it was uploaded, the site hosting it crashed. The moment it was printed, the pages blackened. And the moment people read it, they started disappearing too. The broadcast had been running for hours, piecing together the fragments, following the pattern, every clue, every missing link, every vanishing name. And then, finally, it clicked. This was never random. It wasn't about sickness, about genetics, about survival of the fittest. It was a process, a predetermined sequence, unfolding exactly as intended. The selection wasn't chaotic. It was calculated, designed. The broadcaster's voice shook as they reached the final, unthinkable conclusion. We were never meant to stop it. Panic settled in. Had speaking the truth triggered something? Had they crossed some unseen boundary? The station's power flickered. The signal cracked. The realization hit like a weight in the chest. Every researcher who had come close to the truth had vanished. Every scientist who had questioned the data had gone silent. Every survivor who had started asking why had disappeared before they could find an answer. And now, the station was broadcasting those same questions to thousands, maybe millions. They had just made themselves targets. The transmission cut in and out, static swallowing words, breaking sentences. The broadcaster tried to stay on the air, tried to warn people, but something was pushing back. Then through the distortion, a voice, not the broadcasters, not anyone from the station. Software calm, almost amused. If you're listening, it means you were never meant to survive. The power surged. The signal warped. The equipment overheated. And then silence. The station was gone. For weeks, people searched for the broadcaster. No body was found. No records remained. It was as if the entire station had been erased from history. But sometimes, late at night, when the static on old radio dials stretches too long, too deep, that whisper returns. If you're listening, you're already next. As we wrap up today's broadcast, I want to leave you with this thought. Despite the darkness we face, despite everything we've lost, there's still hope. We're still here. And as long as we keep moving forward, keep building, keep remembering each other, we're not truly lost. No matter what the world looks like around us, there's always something worth fighting for. Always something worth remembering. So let's keep going together. Even when things feel uncertain, remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. We might not have the past, but we have today. And that's enough to make tomorrow worth living for. Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this broadcast, if it helped you feel connected, or maybe just a little less alone, please do me a favor. Like this video, share it with others, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us. And if you want to hear more of these daily broadcasts, you can also support us by clicking the join button on our channel. Every bit of your support helps us keep going, keep sharing, and keep telling the stories that matter. Until next time, keep safe, keep strong, and remember, even in the silence, we are still here. You're still here, and that's all we need to keep moving forward. See you soon.